All right, let's just jump right in. We're going to talk about how one tiny little shellfish managed to cause a massive nationwide disaster. Get ready for this number, $1 billion. That's not the total cost. That's the estimated cost every single year for damage and control in North America. And it's all because of one tiny invasive species. So the big question is, how on earth did a mussel, a little 3-centimeter mussel, shut down power plants, threaten our water supplies, and rack up a bill in the billions? Well, to figure that out, we've got to look at the culprit and, the scene of the crime. All right, Section 1, a $1 billion shellfish. This story doesn't really start with the animal itself. It starts with the absolutely mind-boggling damage it did to our infrastructure. So what did it actually do? Well, its path of destruction was impressive in a terrifying way. We're talking clogged intake pipes for power plants and water treatment facilities. When those clog, cooling systems fail, and that means less electricity for everyone. They crusted over everything: ship holes, docks, water gates. And cleaning them off, it was a constant, super expensive battle. This wasn't just some problem for the fish. It was a direct hit on the stuff we all rely on every single day. I mean, think about it. Your lights going out, your tap running dry, all because of this thing no bigger than your thumbnail? That's exactly what was happening. Okay, so who is this tiny menace? Let's meet our main suspect, the accidental stowaway. And what's wild is that back in its original home, this thing is, it's totally unremarkable. So here it is, the zebra mussel, Dryzena polymorpha. It's a small freshwater mussel, only about 3 to 4 centimeters long, and it's originally from the basins of the Black, Caspian, and Aral Seas. It gets its name from that stripy pattern on its shell, which is kind of cool, I guess. But back home, it's just another part of the food web. It's not really eaten by people, and with plenty of natural predators and fluctuating water levels keeping it in check, it's not a pest, it's not a hero, it's just there. A regular, ordinary shellfish. And that right there is the whole puzzle, isn't it? It had this kind of ecological double life. In its native home, it's just another member of the ecosystem, kept in check. But in North America, it became an ecosystem ruler. Its population just exploded without anything to stop it. It went from being harmless to being a multi-billion-dollar disaster. So what changed? How did this totally ordinary creature from one place become an absolute tyrant in another? The journey of this invader is a classic story of globalization gone wrong. Back in the 1980s, some of its larvae got scooped up into the ballast water of a cargo ship, probably somewhere in the Soviet Union. Nobody noticed, of course. Then in 1988, the first one was officially spotted in Lake St. Clair. By the 90s, the population just went completely nuts, spreading all through the Great Lakes and down into the Mississippi River system. The culprit here was something we never used to think about: ballast water. The water ships take on for stability? It basically became this invisible superhighway for invasive species. Microscopic larvae got sucked up on one side of the world and just spat out on the other. And for years, nobody had a clue it was even happening. So that brings us to the crime scene itself. Let's look at how North America turned out to be the perfect place for this invasion to happen. It was really a perfect storm for a population explosion. First, you have these huge bodies of water, the Great Lakes, that don't completely freeze over. Second, an insane amount of plankton for them to eat. Third, and this is the big one, a near total absence of natural predators. And finally, countless man-made structures, concrete, iron, you name it, for them to attach to. So this mussel didn't just find a new house. It found a paradise. It was literally an all-you-can-eat buffet with no enemies and endless places to live. The conditions were, unfortunately, absolutely perfect for them. And how perfect were the conditions? Take a look at this number, 700,000. That's the max number of zebra mussels they found packed into a single square meter in some places. I mean, that is just an absolutely staggering density. They weren't just colonizing, they were literally carpeting every single available surface. But here's a really weird side effect. The water actually started to look clearer. And that's the paradox, right? These mussels are filter feeders, and with hundreds of thousands of them in every square meter, they were filtering so much plankton out of the water that it looked crystal clear. But this was not a good sign. It wasn't a healthy ecosystem. It was a symptom of a food web that was completely collapsing from the bottom up. The very foundation of life in the lakes was being devoured. So, faced with this absolute crisis, you can bet the authorities launched a massive effort to fight back. But what they found out over decades? was that this was basically an unwinnable war. And you can see how the fight evolved over 30 years. Back in the 90s, it was all about physical removal, just scraping them off with high-pressure washers. Super costly and totally temporary. Then in the 2000s, they moved to chemical treatments, injecting chlorine and other stuff. But that raised a whole new problem. What about all the native species? By the 2010s, they got more targeted, using things like UV light and hot water just on the critical infrastructure. And today? The strategy is basically managed coexistence. We've had to accept that getting rid of them completely is impossible. Which brings us to our final section, a man-made disaster. Because when you look at the whole story, the final verdict isn't really about some evil mussel. It's about the system we created that brought it here. There's this quote that really sums up the new thinking. Invasive species are something to be managed, not eliminated. And that realization was a huge turning point. It was this reluctant admission that some ecological changes, once we set them in motion with all our global trade and travel, are just irreversible. We have to learn to live with the mess we've made. So in the end, the mussel wasn't the aggressor here. The real problem was the system that allowed for its unstoppable global spread. And that's the big takeaway, right? The zebra mussel didn't break our system, it just held up a mirror and exposed the hidden vulnerabilities in the hyper-globalized world we built ourselves. This tiny little shell didn't bring our infrastructure to a halt, it just showed us the consequences of a world where we are the ones who can't seem to stop.